Hi, this is Chris with Phoenix Gaming. Today we're going to take a deep dive into the Cult of Speed, one of the detachments in the Orc Codex. Let's begin. Before we dig into it, if you like the little heads that were on the thumbnail, there's an Amazon link in the description. Those are the Cromlech Orc Punk Rocker heads. If you don't know, Cromlech makes some really cool third-party stuff that you can put on your Warhammer minis. A lot of their stuff's resin, really high detail, really high quality. They are phenomenal kits. You can even get whole models. They do like the kill rig, stuff like that. Like they have their own alternate sculpts for a lot of stuff. Really neat stuff. Check them out for sure. Even if you don't get it through the link, definitely give them a look. First, we're going to talk about detachment rules. We're going to talk about enhancements, stratagems, competitive viability. We're not going to do an example list today. I know it says it on the screen, but we're going to skip that part. I actually didn't do a good job of doing it last time anyway. Again, if you want to know what I think about what a good list is, mention it in the comments and I'll drop a Google Doc. It just saves time because these videos can get a little long and I don't want to make them longer. The detachment rule, again, just a forewarning, this is based off of internet leaks and rumors. I don't have the full codex just yet. I should have it probably within the next few days here. So we're going off of everything that we've all seen on the internet. Speed Freaks units gain advance and fall back and shoot. And then Speed Freaks units would be bikes. And I assume that if knobs on bikes are still around, they'll get the Speed Freaks keywords just like the regular bikes do. But there's a part of me that's wondering if they're going to end up getting slapped with that Legends tag. Maybe not right away, but there's a good chance they do in the future. There's a lot of reasoning for me to think that, but I'm not going to talk about that right now. War Boss on bike and the Death Killer War Trike are getting it. The buggies will have it. The copters will have it. The aircraft will have it. The trucks and the battle wagons will not. I understand the wagons not getting it. The trucks not getting it is weird. Ultimately, I think it's more from a game design balance standpoint than it is anything else. With it having firing deck 12, they probably don't want people loading a bunch of Ludas into it and then slapping one of the stratagems on the truck because heaven forbid orcs have shooting that's actually useful. And that's kind of my approach on it, and we'll cover that in a little bit. We're going to start with the enhancements. The Wazblasta, it's 10 points. You can only put it on a War Trike, and it gives you a move, shoot, move, and it's a 6-inch move after you shoot, but you can't charge. It's situationally okay. I mean, the unit he's attached to is going to move 18 inches if you advance anyway, so it does allow you to move a total of 24 inches, and you could, like run up the board, shoot, and then hide, I guess, and you will be able to gain a lot of ground. But I just only see this as a points filler if you don't already have an enhancement on it. And I don't see a lot of reason for you to take it outside of maybe you put them in strategic reserves and then shoot with them and get a 6-inch move. But ultimately, I just feel like you'd almost rather charge with his unit. If he's got mega knobs attached to him, or not mega knobs, excuse me, if he's got knobs on bikes attached to him, you need them charging. If he's got regular bikes attached to him, you're getting more movement if you can charge. I mean, I guess ultimately, again, to me, it's filler if you don't have an enhancement on him and you've got like 10 extra points, you throw it on there. But other than that, I just don't feel like it's really worth putting in your army. It's not something I would plan around. Faster than you, 35 points. Infantry model only, and it and the unit it is attached to get assault ramp. And what I mean by that is that your transport can move, then your unit can disembark, and then you can charge. And that is really nasty for a unit of mega knobs with a boss or knobs, regular knobs with a boss out of a truck or wagon. That is a lot of mobility for a hard hitting unit, and that's a lot of mobility in any turn. That's not a I need the wah in order to get them there. That is a you get out of position and this unit will punish you for it, especially with a wagon, because you can move the wagon, disembark, you could charge with both units, tank shock with the wagon, and clear out with the knobs. It's one of those where, it's really good, and 35 points is worth it for what you're getting out of it. I think if you see Cult of Speed lists competitively, I think you're going to see this detachment or this enhancement in them. Squig hide tires, war truck or war trikes unit consolidates 6 inches. It's all right. It's kind of like the 6 inch move, you know, the Wasblasta. If it's not attached to knobs on bikes, it could be a good take. But knobs on bikes already do this, so you don't need it if that's where it's attached. If it's attached to regular bikers, yeah, maybe, you know, it's worth it. The extra 6 inches, or the extra 3 inches, I should say, is a good amount of movement, and it does help keep you from getting stuck out in the open and not being able to move on to objectives. So it's one of those where it's a good take if you've got the 15 points. Again, I wouldn't necessarily plan my game plan or anything else around it. But again, because this is an enhancement, that just makes me wonder even more if the knobs on bikes are going to Legends. Situationally, it's good. It's cheap enough and arguably a better filler than Wasblasta. So if you've got the extra points, I would take this over the Wasblasta. Speed makes right. In the command phase, if you are within 9 inches of an enemy model, gain a CP on a 3 plus. You can put it on any Orc character. Situationally good. You could theoretically drop Gretchen out of your list because this is going to give it to you on a 3-up and Gretchen are on a 4-up. But I just think Gretchen overall are more reliable because you can just leave them on a backfield objective, screen out your deployment zone with them. You get more utility out of them. And for, 15 extra points, you get 10 wounds and a screen and all these other things that don't have to be within 9 of a unit in order to get that command point. So if you're going to spend those points, I just think it's better off spending them on the Gretchen rather than the enhancement. We're going to talk about stratagems now. We're going to start with Speediest Freaks. This one's kind of weird, and I'll need to see the actual wording on it. It's a 5-up invuln for speed freaks or truck units when attacked. It's a 4-up invuln if it's a vehicle unit with T8 or less. It just seems weird to me that bikes would get a 5-up invuln and then Coptas get a 4-up invuln. Really, I feel like everything should just get the 4-up invuln at that point because there's not a lot of non-vehicle speed freaks. So it just seems really odd to me for it to be worded that way. It is a good durability buff for units that are jumping from the 6-up to the 4-up. Squig flinging, speed freak or truck unit that ends a move within 9 inches of an enemy unit. That enemy unit takes a battle shock test at -1. I just think this is a waste of command points. Really, I think most abilities that target battle shock are a waste. Things like the Death Dread, where it's just like, oh, everything within engagement range makes a battle shock test. Just overall a big waste of points or a big waste of ability. If they fail, that just means they can't use reactive strats in Overwatch, which sure that could be helpful. But if you're running a speed freak army, you're going to be a little bit higher toughness than most things. So arguably, you're not going to run into a ton of Overwatch outside of a couple of armies, or any army that could just spam rerolls. So it could help potentially score a secondary or two here and there, just because if they fail the battle shock, they'll lose OC. So you could get things like the one where you got to take objectives from your opponent. I can't think of what it's called off the top of my head. But overall, I just think it's unreliable. Storm, Speed Freak units gain sustained hits, and then they gain sustained 2 within 9 inches. Orc shooting gets twice as good, but it's still not good. There are units worth using it on. I think Coptas are one of them. If you've got 6 Coptas, they're going to average 12 shots with their rockets, and that's usually going to get you 3 hits. But when you're within 9, it's going to actually average 7 hits. And you've got twin linked rockets. It's not crazy good, but it could at least justify rolling some of these shooting dice that a lot of times get skipped over by Orc players because they're just like, I'm wasting both of our times. The jets, right? If you've got a Wasbomb on the table, that could be a good target for something like this. The Daka jet, etc. I mean, these are all good targets for it. The problem with the aircraft is that they have to start in reserve because we don't get hover like, a lot of Marine aircraft do. So they have to start in reserve. So it's going to be turn 3 before you could even use this strat to its full effect with an aircraft. And that's assuming your aircraft doesn't get blown off the table. So it's just kind of a mixed bag for me. Again, I just don't think Orc shooting is worth buffing because it hasn't been good in so long. Blitzifier does give you lethal hits at ranged, and then criticals on 5 if you're within 9 inches, but you can't stack it with Dagger Storm, which I think is lame. You know, it's one of those where you're spending 2 command points. They could arguably just say, hey, if you want to stack them, it's going to take 3 command points. Because heaven forbid, Orc players have good shooting, like I said. It's just, again, you're hitting on 5s. Crits on 5s within 9 is fine. And there's a few units you're going to like that on. Anything that has baked in sustained hits, stuff like that. It's just overall to me is not, it's not the best use of a stratagem. Again, if you could stack them, absolutely, because then you could double stack on your Coptas. You could have some lethals, you could have some sustained, and you could really pick up a lot of dice. But the fact that it's one or the other, and there's not a lot of good shooting interactions in the index or codex. It's just one of those where overall I'll have to see all of this on the table and how it interacts. I just don't think it's going to do much. Full throttle gives you +1 to wound on the charge. This is really meaty, and it's good for almost every Speed Freak unit. If you still have knobs on bikes, if you're not on the wall, that's 9 claws that are strength 9, neg 2 damage with +1 to wound. You'll get 12 of them on the wall, plus the boss if you've got a boss in there. So it's one of those where that's really good. And then Coptas are really good because now you're getting +1 to wound. You're wounding things like Storm Guardians on 2s, Termagants on 2s, and you could really clear out a lot of that chaff type stuff. More gets over here. It's a reactive 6-inch move. It's almost identical to every army's reactive move. You know, Drukhari has one. A lot of armies have one at this point, at least a lot of detachments, or at least one detachment in each army. So I don't need to dig into that too deep. These are never bad to have. It is only for speed freaks, but that's how pretty much all the strats interact anyway. But again, I think this is one of the better ones. I think this and Full Throttle are the two standouts. Competitive viability overall, I think this detachment's going to score okay. I think it's actually probably going to score fairly well. And that's just because you're always eligible to shoot. So it's going to be really hard to stop secondary shooting. And that means it could be really tempting to take things like fixed secondaries because you can just advance or fall back and get like your teleport homers. It's going to be really hard to just shut it off. So if you're always eligible to shoot, you're going to be able to position yourself to always be able to score your points. And that, to me, is going to be what keeps this detachment even remotely viable. I just don't think it's going to have the damage output that the other detachments do. While the other detachments won't have the mobility and the secondary scoring potential that this one does, they're all going to have better removal. A shooting focused detachment for Orks, honestly, shooting for Orks has been bad since 9th, and that's really immediately following the aircraft buggy nerf, and it was mostly the aircraft nerf that did it, because in order for the buggies to really pop off, you needed the aircraft to do something, and once aircraft got just nerfed into the dirt, it just shut down the ability to really make a shooting focused army for Orks that was worth putting on the table. I do think buggies are pretty modestly priced and they're fairly durable. I don't think they're crazy durable, but it's a good middle ground unit. And I think this becomes, you know, with the speed, the Cult of Speed, I think it's a very matchup specific list and build. I think you're going to do very well into certain matchups, and I think there's just going to be some matchups where you're getting hosed. Without playing it, though, I just think it struggles to consistently do damage. You know, you hit high toughness armies like Knights or Votann with their Hecatons or Marines with Land Raiders, and I think you just struggle. I could be wrong. I'm theorizing. I'm going to probably find out a little bit this week. Overall, I think it's a flavorful detachment, but I don't think it had a lot of thought put into it, and it feels a lot more like lip service rather than any real thought was actually put into it. And I understand every codex has to have a worse detachment, and overall, I think this is it, or at least close to it. If knobs on bikers are gone, I think that really hurts this detachment, and you know it's just going to struggle to do consistent melee damage. I'd like to have seen advance and shoot, and then maybe like a sustained within 12 inches as the army rule, and then use strats to interact and manipulate that stuff rather than what we got. And I don't think it's the worst by a wide margin. And overall, I think the Codex is very solid, and every detachment is at least playable, both in a narrative and competitive aspect. And I think it's somewhere around 3 out of 5 teeth. I think the matchup specificity of the army holds it back a lot, and the reliance on shooting at ballistic skill 5 without real great support hurts. And what I mean by real great support is, yes, we have units that shoot, and yes, there are strats that can support that shooting. But with rockets having blast, you can't shoot them at units that are engaged. And, so you're relying on non-rockets shooting if you're getting tied up. Yes, you can fall back and shoot, but then you also can't charge. So it's a lot of weird interactions. Like I said, overall, I'll have to see it on the table. I just think what's going to happen is you're going to play against shooting armies and you're going to get shot off the table. And then maybe you play against some melee armies and you can do some damage, but it's going to largely depend on the melee army also. But that's where I think it stands. 3 out of 5. And again, I don't think it's a huge gap between 3 and 4. I think the snake bites detachment is somewhere around here because again, that matchup specificity is going to be what keeps that snake bite snagas detachment from really popping off and doing well. But all in all, like I said, it's a solid detachment. It'll play well. Big shout out to my YouTube member, Kevin. I appreciate the support, homie. Hatchlings, the real Donnie G. I appreciate you, buddy. Phoenix, Jamie, thank you. Immortals, Lord Wellingstone, Danny Boy, Captain Too Tall. Thanks a lot for the support. You guys are awesome. Thanks for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe.